Good morning, all. My clock shows 0900 in the morning. Thank you for joining the Statewide MARAC call. My name is Mitchell Soto. I'm an emergency service coordinator with CalOES Coastal Region. Before we begin the presentations for the statewide call, I want to announce one change to the meeting agenda. There's one more presentation that was added after the agenda was distributed. So it's CalOES 911 Emergency Communications Branch, and they will be starting their presentation at 11:20 today. First of all, I want to say thank you to all the presenters for agreeing to give us your time for this meeting. And we will go ahead and start with CalOES Fire Assistant Chief Chris Cox with the FMAG presentation.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Audio check. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we'll get going here. Okay, well, good morning, everybody. Happy Monday morning. Hope those of you that were mothers had a nice Mother's Day yesterday, and those of you that shared the day with your families also had a nice day. So what I was asked to do this morning is go through our FMAG, Fire Management Assistance Grant Program. And when I am finished, I know John Ketching is going to be also going through the same program from the recovery aspect. Some of the slides that I have are also covered by him, so some of those I'll probably gloss through a little quickly because it's more on his side of the house. And by the end of both presentations, it should be a fairly good overview. Okay, so the FMAG program is not a CalOES program. We administer it for the state of California, but it's actually a FEMA program. And what the program is designed to do is provide supplemental assistance to state, tribal, and local governments for basically the mitigation, management, and control of any fire that's on public or private land. And the caveat to the FEMA assistance is that it will threaten such destruction as would constitute a major disaster. And we will define that a little more in detail in a future slide. So eligibility is any city, county, or state can apply for the program. The applications run through CalOES, and then we're the ones that reach out to FEMA to actually file the application. Tribal government lands are not authorized to request FMAG declarations directly, but they can apply through us, and we would submit on their behalf. And in most cases, any fires that impact tribal lands are also going to affect other adjacent lands that would be a FMAG declaration for multiple authorities having jurisdiction there. Federal lands are not eligible. The federal government already budgets for fire protection on federal lands, such as Forest Service lands or national park lands, things like that. So they don't participate in the FEMA program. It's strictly city, county, or state. Okay, in order to apply for an FMAG, the local agency has to have legal responsibility for the fire suppression. And a key point is the FMAG has to be applied for while the fire is burning uncontrolled and located within the designated incident area, meaning that the fire has to be within that jurisdiction.
Service worker is part of public service. It's about stepping up when the community needs it most and being ready to adapt, support.
Somebody's got some audio going there. Okay. Cost share. So the way the FMAG grant works, it's a 75% match, and then 25% comes from the local agency or from the state. And I know John will expand upon that later during the reimbursement part of it. Eligible costs are basically costs to mitigate the emergency, either fire suppression costs law enforcement, evacuation costs, things like that. It's not really a recovery program. It's an actual mitigation type program. And I know John will be covering that in greater detail. Okay. Every state at the beginning of the year has a cost threshold, and those cost thresholds are adjusted annually. The cost threshold is based on the state population. And I think the next slide shows. So there's two different thresholds. There's an individual fire cost. So California cannot apply, or we could apply, but we're not going to receive an FMAG unless the individual fire suppression and mitigation costs exceed the $3.8 million, or the state and local agencies cumulatively have spent $11.5 million for the year. And the way it works is the formula is $1.94 times the state population, which gives us the $39 million there. The way that works, well, let me back up. So individual fire costs, year to date, we're middle of May now. Year to date, we haven't had any fires that have exceeded 3.8 million. And our cumulative threshold, I just saw an email last week from CAL FIRE who tracks this. We're not at the cumulative threshold yet. We are probably, I believe the email said we're about 80 to 90% of the cumulative threshold. So within the next few weeks, a lot of the fires we're having in the middle of the state, a lot of the grass fires, CAL FIRE carefully tracks their suppression costs of those fires that are burning throughout the state. And we will very quickly get to that cumulative threshold. So once that number is achieved, which means that's how much money we've spent collectively statewide in fire suppression activities, then the door would open for FMAG applications. So if we did have a fire that was under that individual fire cost, we could then submit and apply for the FMAG, and it would be considered by FEMA. So this $1.94 times the 39 million population is approximately $74 million. So remember that number in a future slide, because we're going to be talking about what the definition of a significant major disaster declaration would be. Okay, so these are the 4 criteria for an FMAG to be approved by FEMA. The first is threat to lives and improved property, including threats to critical facilities, infrastructure, and critical watershed areas. The availability of state and local firefighting resources within a given geographic area. High fire danger conditions, as indicated by things such as National Fire Danger Rating, or it could be red flag warnings, or any other significant drought, fuel conditions, and weather situations, which are typically captured by that fire danger rating system, and a potential major economic impact. And the major economic impact, that's where it comes in as the $74 million. So if a fire is burning uncontrolled and it is threatening a community, if that community doesn't have the assessed valuation of the improvements at $73 or $74 million, FEMA would consider that to not be a major economic impact and would likely not approve the FMAG. Okay, so some of the information that we collect and we pass on to FEMA if we move the application to them is the size of the fire in acres or square miles, name, location, and population of the communities threatened, number of primary and secondary residences and businesses threatened, distance of the fire to the nearest communities. And one thing that we look to the local agencies to help identify is FEMA takes much greater consideration for primary residents than they do for vacation homes. So communities that have a large percentage of vacation homes would not be considered the same as if it was all primary residences. And backing up a little bit, I do know that can be a difficult thing to measure for local agencies. And I've talked to a few agencies, and some of them don't really measure that real well, and others have different ways of attempting to capture what percentage of homes in their areas are vacation homes. And obviously resort type areas, they're aware that those types of vacation homes exist, and some of the agencies do have ways of tracking it. Some additional information for the declaration request: number of persons evacuated. We rely heavily on the evacuation warnings and orders that most of the counties are using, such as the Genesis systems, just to paint a really clear picture about areas around a fire that are being evacuated or put on a notice that they might need to evacuate. We look at current and predicted weather conditions and the degree to which state and local resources are committed to this fires and other fires, both locally in an area or statewide. In other words, our resource drawdown. We also look at the fire severity maps, geographic, topographical, land assessment maps, and for fires that we typically don't see this because most FMAG applications come in during the first burning period of a fire, which is essentially the first day that the fire starts. The ICS 209 submittals are done typically twice a day, at 6 in the morning, at 6 at night. And a fire that breaks out at 3 or 4 in the afternoon is generally likely not going to have an ICS 209 that first day. But that's when the significant threat could be occurring. And we're looking at the fire later that evening before the first 209 submittals usually end. However, we have had some fires that have gone on for 2, 3, 4 days, and then they start moving in a certain direction. And a management team is submitting those 209s. So we do have that data to look at on some more established incidents, but typically that's not the case. Okay, so the objective for a local agency is to submit a complete and comprehensive package while the fire remains uncontrolled, providing all information that FEMA needs to consider or request. And that's one of the things we do here at OES is work with those local agencies. We take a look at all of the application materials. We make positive contact with the requester, get frequent status updates, verify all the information, and then start our process to determine whether it's going to be pushed to FEMA or placed on hold. Okay, the basic form that we use to request an FMAG is called the ABC form. It's CalOES Fire and Rescue form number 158. It's available on our website. And it goes to the warning center. So the best procedure to do for a local agency that's going to submit a form is to start working on it, but call the warning center and let them know that you're going to be submitting an FMAG request. The FMAG request with the supporting documentation goes to the warning center mailbox address there, and then call the warning center to make sure they've received it. And then the warning center will contact our FMAG duty officer at Fire Rescue. We always have one on duty. And we will start the process with our local assistant chiefs that are either monitoring the fire or have responded to the fire, and Chief Marshal, and we will start the process. Now, I will take a quick sidebar here. We do have a brand new process that is getting rolled out. We had a webinar last week with the fire service, and we had a couple hundred people online there. We have a new online application form, and it hasn't been posted to our website yet because I was checking that out last night. But the online form and the webinar will be posted to the website here as soon as a little bit of editing gets done, and it will be available for everybody to start using. And in the future, that will be the only way. I don't know when the ABC form will sunset. I would imagine that it'll remain a viable form to submit for an FMAG throughout most, if not all of this fire season. But then in the future, it'll just be the online form. The online form is actually really nice. It actually captures a lot more information, and it automatically links submitters to some of the products, some of the fire danger stuff, and some of our excuse me, some of our fire intelligence products that we'll look at here in just a few minutes. So this is the ABC form. In its current form, it's a form fillable PDF. And typically we find, you can see the box that the arrow's pointing to there is a, you fill in all the boxes with all of the data, and then there's a box for a narrative. But to paint a real clear narrative picture, that small box typically isn't adequate. So most of the applications we receive have a supplemental page, which is just, just start typing in Word and start really providing some clarity as to what the threats are and what the situation is with resources, fire behavior, things like that. Okay, so this would be an example of an attachment with some bullet points of the additional information, which is a little bit more than there's room in those boxes to fill out. Okay, one of the requirements of the FMAG is to provide a map. CAL FIRE has a program that an FMAG analysis program that they use to generate a map. Users can use NG Scout or any other platform that they have to generate a map. And the map basically just shows the topography, the community features, and the current fire perimeter, or as close to current fire perimeter as they can, and showing arrows and direction of fire travel so we can see where the head of the fire is. Things like that is very helpful. Or they can also use our WFTIC intelligence maps that we generate with our virus aircraft and other tools. So this is an example of a map that our WFTIC generates. When we fly our virus aircraft over these fires, we can generate a perimeter and overlay it on several different layers of data showing the community. It also populates with the Genesis and a few other of the evacuation warning and order areas, as you can see there by the yellow and pink shading. Here's a different picture of the WFTIC map that just shows the populated areas. This one shows land ownership, because we discussed earlier that FMAG is not going to be considered for forest land ownership. And on this one, you can see that the green land ownership would be federal land, and the tan would be, in this case, state or local responsibility lands. And then the white would be the incorporated cities, or actually unincorporated areas that are developed, but outside of the federal lands. So we highly encourage FMAG applicants, when we do training with the fire departments, to use our WFTIC products, because we're using the WFTIC products to analyze the fire and the threats. And it's a free service to them. They can also make contact with WFTIC, which is also staffed 24/7. And if available, based on weather and usage, we can launch the virus aircraft, which most fires get virus overflight, to download the perimeters and the fire behavior products that go along with that. So we have different levels of WFTIC. We have an initial assessment, and then we have, which a lot of those are run automatically because it's programmed to generate these initial assessments. And then we have specific things that we can look at and if we have any questions, the WFTIC people can start getting into the data and start running customized reports to determine fire behavior, fire spread, and determine infrastructure. And there's a lot of infrastructure stuff listed here, obviously railroads, electrical infrastructure, communication sites, agriculture use, a lot of different things, dams, levees, transportation facilities, and the like. So WFTIC does take a look at the burning indexes, the drought monitors, fire potential, current weather, topography, and can generate pretty accurate maps of potential fire spread in the future. Okay, so what do we do when we receive an FMAG application? Our FMAG duty officer will notify Chief Marshal. He takes the lead in notifying the director of OES that we have a FMAG application. We start reviewing the data. We start taking a look at our WFTIC products to determine what the threat levels are. And if the chief and the director concur, we will, the warning center facilitates a Microsoft Teams meeting, and we have representatives from throughout OES response. We have the director, several of the deputy directors, obviously our fire staff, but we also have our emergency management duty officers and our law enforcement duty officers, and any of those folks that have actually responded to either the fire or local emergency operation centers or evacuation centers, or have been in contact with them so that they have a clear picture. So we're taking a look at a picture not only from fire rescue, but from the emergency management and the law enforcement as well. And all of those folks actually report out on current situation and needs based on what's going on during that conference call process. So basically, this says the same thing, that we validate that the application submitted, everything is correct. Contact the requester as many times as necessary to validate information or get current situation. Situations change. It's a dynamic, obviously fire is a dynamic moving thing, and we want to make sure that we've got the latest and greatest information. So sometimes we do have to reach out and get updated information, because the time that it takes a requester to put an FMAG package together, get it submitted to the warning center, have us review it. Sometimes we'll wait a few minutes for the virus flight to be completed so that we can get better data and download it into the system so we can evaluate it. Could be a couple hours, and by then the situation may have changed. It may have gotten worse, or they may have received some good resources and the fire mitigation threat has been mitigated largely. And so that occurs frequently as well. So a fire that starts out as a major threat, by the time some of the larger aircraft get on scene and the resources arrive on scene, and start suppression operations in various ways, the threats could have been mitigated, which means that we would choose to not push the FMAG, but leave the door open. So one key thing that a lot of people don't realize, I'm sure many of you on the call do realize, excuse me for my cough this morning, is we only have one chance to push an FMAG to FEMA. If we send an FMAG application to FEMA and FEMA denies the request, that door is closed forever. So like I just talked about, if we do have a fire that's burning and we don't think it's necessarily a threat, we don't think FEMA would approve it based on all of the criteria that we've previously talked about, we submit it to FEMA and FEMA says, no, this doesn't meet the criteria. But then later that night or the next day, the winds pick up and a big windstorm comes in or something happens and the fire takes off and starts taking out a community. And we say, oh, it definitely meets the threat now. At that point, it's too late. We call FEMA back and they say, sorry, we've already denied it. We only have one chance at it. So if we truly feel that the fire in its current situation is not going to meet the threat, we will take an action that we call placing the fire on hold. And placing the fire on hold is not a denial. That just means we're waiting to see what happens. Because if that situation I just described does occur, where the fire takes off, we will reconsider and say, yeah, now the situation is much worse. We're going to go ahead and push it to FEMA. And in many cases, we place fires on hold. It's because the initial attack suppression efforts have been largely successful, or the fire behavior has not manifested itself to what we thought it might. And the fire ended up not posing the threat to that community. Then we would consider that a success, because we don't want to ever shut the door on somebody. It's kind of a fine line. We want to push things to FEMA. We want to take advantage of the program and provide the assistance, financial assistance for these fires, but we don't want to get denied and then have a situation go south and not have the ability to push it. Oh, one thing on the last slide, there is an appeal process. So if we do push something and FEMA denies it, and then something happens, the local agency has the ability to submit an appeal. I've never been involved with an appeal process. All the FMAGs I've done, we've either pushed them or we've placed them on hold. And I don't personally recall any appeals. I'm sure it has occurred either in California or nationwide. So when we submit to FEMA, it goes to the FEMA Region 9 Watch Office, which is in the Bay Area. We contact this watch office phone number. They staff it 24/7. We can push documentation to them via the email. But largely the actual application that we provide to FEMA is given verbally over the phone. And they have a checklist that they fill out. And one of the things we did when we developed our ABC form is FEMA asks us more questions than we were capturing on the ABC form. So we've really gone through their list, and our new online form has really stepped up the amount of information that the local agencies provide to us, because those are questions that we're going to turn around and ask the local agencies anyway, because we know that FEMA is going to ask that of us. And some of that information they may not have, but they can generally gather it pretty quickly. But in order to minimize time delays in that, it's included on the form. And then when we, as last week, we rolled out the initial webinar, we start rolling out training to these local agencies statewide, as well as CAL FIRE, who submits a large percentage of the FMAGs. They'll know to start capturing that information and or they capture it already, but gathering that information so they can include it into the application. Okay, once FEMA receives an application, they will turn to a subject matter expert who they call the principal advisor. And the principal advisors are, in California, they use either the Forest Service or one of the Interior Department fire agencies. I know in Southern California, they use Chief Matt Ahern, who works, he's the Southern South Ops Chief for the entire Forest Service. And then he has a counterpart up at North Ops in Redding. And they will review the application, take a look at the fire threat as a subject matter expert, because they're fire people. FEMA are admittedly not fire people, although they have a good idea of what's going on. And the principal advisor makes a recommendation to FEMA that says, yes, this is a legitimate threat. We recommend that you approve it. Or the principal advisor can say, no, we do not feel this is credible based on all the information provided, because either the threat levels don't reach the thresholds, or the mitigation already occurring is successful, or things like that. So The principal advisor makes the recommendation back to FEMA. FEMA will either approve or deny. Once we receive the approval, FEMA will send us an email back to the our OES FMAG duty chief, letting us know that the FEMA approval is has gone through. So we will take that email and we will forward it to the duty officers of various OES, such as law enforcement, reimbursement, emergency management, and our fire staff. And we will forward those emails to the applicant. So FEMA will assign a FMAG approval number to the approval, but that number in most cases will not come immediately, because those are issued out of the FEMA Washington, D.C. office. So if we're crunching an FMAG at 9 or 10 o'clock in the evening, FEMA Washington, D.C. offices are closed. They won't issue the number until the following morning during business hours. So, and I know we've gotten requests, hey, what's the number? What's the number? Well, we have an email from FEMA that says it's approved. The number is pending. Once business hours commence the following day, we'll get that approval email with the actual FEMA number from them, and it'll be distributed. And usually we just get that to the warning center, and the warning center distributes it to the to their distribution list for the FMAGs. Okay, the incident period. So the incident period of an FMAG is based on the actual time of the incident that the threat existed and needed to be mitigated. It does not necessarily mean the entire incident is part of the incident period. So the incident period will start, typically it starts when the fire begins, because in most cases, the fire beginning within the first few hours poses a significant threat. And that's when we get contacted to start the FMAG application. But it could be a fire that's been burning for a few days or a week, and then all of a sudden it starts to make a threat to the to a local jurisdiction and the infrastructure. So at some point during that time of the application process is when the clock is going to start. And then later that day, the following day, 3 or 4 days later, as long as that threat exists, the incident period will be running for FEMA. Once that threat starts to be mitigated, and we can see that due to percentages of containment, due to the fire no longer burning in the areas that were previously threatened, due to evacuation orders and warnings being lifted, and areas being repopulated, roads being reopened, things like that. We have a process that we use, and it typically goes through CAL FIRE, because most of these incidents that we do FMAGs on are going to be CAL FIRE incidents. We have a process. There's a list of 7 questions that we go through that FEMA provides to us, and we fill out an incident period form. I don't remember what that form is called, but we fill out a form with a recommendation to FEMA as to when that incident period will close. And once that incident period closes, say it's 4 or 5 days after it was opened, that's when the reimbursement clock stops. And that doesn't necessarily mean the incident is over. The fire could still be burning, or it could still be in mop up and overhaul status to get complete containment. And or mop up and patrol operations that occur for several days, and in some cases several weeks, and some fires we've seen in California for a couple months. But the actual incident period that FEMA is going to reimburse for is during that incident period that was determined and approved by FEMA. And they also use their principal advisor as a for advisement in the duration of the incident period as well. These are the 7 questions that FEMA asks us that we evaluate, and in coming up with a recommendation when to close the incident period. The fire threat to homes, the critical infrastructure, public facilities no longer exists. Evacuation orders have been lifted. Roadblocks and road closures have been lifted. Fire suppression resources are demobilizing. If there's a threat, why are you sending your fire resources home? Transition to lower level incident management team. High confidence and security of the containment lines. Absence of approaching weather event, which may impact fire behavior, and percentage of containment. So we take a look at those on a daily, sometimes twice daily process after an FMAG has been granted. Usually if we have an incident management team deployed, we're going to be using, or the incident is going to be using a lot of mutual aid resources. So we'll have one of our OES fire rescue assistant chiefs, one or more assigned to the incident anyway. They'll be on scene, and they're usually the ones that take the lead in evaluating answers to these questions, along with the FMAG duty officer, and providing that information back up to our chief so we can make a recommendation to FEMA when to close. Obviously, the longer the incident period is open is a greater benefit to the local agencies and to the state, because that means FEMA funding lasts longer. But we do realize that the rules for the FMAG specifically state what the money is supposed to be used for. So we do work with them in attempting to come to a reasonable and fair closing period for that incident. And at the end of the day, FEMA has the sole responsibility for approving or denying the recommendations of when that incident period is going to close. So just a quick little flow chart. Uncontrolled flyer, governor's request. One thing I did not mention is the governor has what we call the GAR, is the governor's authorized representative. And in our case, it's our CalOES director, or it could be her designee if she was on vacation or something. She's really the only one that can say, yes, we are going to push this request to FEMA. In fact, the first question that FEMA asks us when we call them to push a request is, has the GAR been notified and does the GAR approve this? And we say, yes, she has approved us pushing the request. So it's not me, it's not Chief Marshal, it's our director. She's the one that makes a decision to push it to FEMA. So we push the request to FEMA. If FEMA approves it, then we go through the process to determine the incident period. And at that point, our reimbursement recovery division of OES picks up the ball and runs with it. And I know John's going to go through that process, and I'll just let him go through the rest of the process as far as working with the local agencies and the state agencies that are involved with putting together the packages to submit to FEMA for the reimbursements. And currently we have two FMAG duty chiefs, John Woody and myself. And this is it says North and South, but I typically handle training and other information requests in the South. He typically handles it in the North, but one of the two of us is always going to be the FMAG duty officer. So it doesn't matter. If there's a fire up north and I'm the duty officer, I'll handle it, and vice versa. So this is our contact information. Be on the lookout for the new online submittals that's going to be posted to our website here very shortly. And if you want to go through and see what it looks like, there's you can watch the webinar. Chief Kempner, who runs our WFTIC Intel Center, does the webinar, and it was his shop that put the online submittal together, and they did a great job. And there's also for those of you local jurisdictions, there is a training submittal, so you can actually click the training application and go through and actually practice doing the new online forms. So that concludes my presentation, unless there are any questions.
Chief, if you're okay with it, I'll jump right into my presentation, try to get through it quickly, and then we can do questions right at the end, because I think there are a few in the chat that I can address, and I think you've already, if you're good with taking it at the end.
That would be good. I have our weekly fire rescue call I'm going to jump on at 10 o'clock. So depending on how long your presentation lasts, once my call is done, I'll jump back on and we can circle back around.
I will be done long before 10 o'clock. Nobody wants to hear that much about the grant portion of FMAG. So really, it's about getting that FMAG up front, I think. Let's see if my presentation will load here. Okay, so looking at the grant portion again, as Chief Cox had mentioned, there's a great deal of this information that overlaps their presentation, covers quite a bit of it, but this is talking about after you've been granted the FMAG for the most part. So starting off with the state fire cost thresholds, he had already mentioned these. One of the questions in the chat is, do we have these posted anywhere? Not that I'm aware of online. They do change on January 1st every year. And for my part, I would recommend that if your jurisdiction has the impacts that you think reach the level of an FMAG, reach out to your CalOES Fire and Rescue representative, and they're going to walk you through that process. Because this resets every calendar year, it's a little tricky to know when the state has met that cumulative fire threshold. If it was last year, January 7th, we were pretty much there. This year, you can see it's taken a little bit more time for us to reach the cumulative threshold, but an individual fire could get there very, very quickly if it is large enough. And typically the ones we see with an FMAG request, very often they can get to that level very early on in the process. So applicant eligibility, if you've worked in the FEMA Public Assistance Program, this covers a lot of the same areas. FMAG came out of that program. So the eligible applicants are going to be state agencies, so folks like CAL FIRE who are responding, local governments, special districts, and Indian tribal governments. In this case, for this program, private nonprofits are not eligible applicants. And it's because of the way the activities and the categories work out in relation to this program. So those eligible activities, they have to occur during the incident period with very, very limited exceptions. And that's where that incident period date setting that the chief talked about is so important. We want to make sure that we get that correct, or to a period that we can be, maybe we're not happy with it. It doesn't cover everything, but it's going to cover quite a bit of the response costs associated with it to make sure that they're eligible for this reimbursement. Has to be legal responsibility of the applicant and all of the other things associated with this. That second to last bullet, no self-deployment. If you have mutual aid and it's not defined by documentation ahead of time, we want to make sure that we get an post-incident MOU set up with those requesting and providing agencies to make sure that we can cover those. Otherwise, FEMA does look at that as self-deployment. So the eligible categories of work, Category B, that's one I think most everybody's familiar with. Those are your emergency protective measures, actions to protect life, safety, improve property. FEMA has also created a Category H specific to firefighting activities. Most of the time on a major disaster deck, those get rolled into Category B, but they do separate them out for the purposes of an FMAG. And then there's also Category Z, which are the direct administrative costs. That's the additional funding provided for managing this as a grant with the federal government, essentially. The eligible costs, again, fitting within those categories, typically we're going to see overtime and contract labor, limited exceptions on other things, but not straight time. Equipment, materials. If you have something that is damaged as a direct result of the fire, you lose a engine or building as a result of it. A building wouldn't typically be included unless it had direct firefighting or some nexus there to that Category B work. But for the fire equipment that's in the field, if you have a police cruiser that gets overrun and you lose that, once the insurance recovery is offset, that remaining cost can be included in there. So the eligible essential assistance. So this is, again, still category B, but this covers more of those things outside of the traditional firefighting. So sheltering and evacuations, animal evacuations, but only if it's a safety issue. So if you have to remove animals from a field or wildland area that is fenced, or that somebody has the right to raise livestock on, if that's part of the firefighting requirements and it is a safety issue, that evacuation is allowed. There is, again, limited if it's the normal sheltering and evacuation, you're evacuating pets as a result of that, again, may be eligible, but we would want to look at that. Search and rescue inside of that incident period is eligible, along with a fire investigation team. Many times we don't see those two things happening inside the incident period, but if they do, they can be included as well. So for costs incurred outside of the incident period, this is where we talk about MOB and DMOB. Often that can be included. We typically look at like a 72-hour window on either side of that incident period. But if you have a justification you can make, we would ask you to include those items. And then that temporary repair of damage caused by those firefighting activities. So if you had firefighters who had to cut through a fence to get to where they needed to be fighting the fire, the repair of that fence, if completed within 30 days of the close of the incident period, can be included as an eligible expense. So funding, Chief talked about this. It starts at 75%. It doesn't typically get adjusted. Sometimes we'll see on our major decks an adjustment there. That local share remaining then typically ends up at 25%. And most of the time we don't have CDAA cost share associated with an FMAG. Occasionally we do. It's very, very rare. I've seen it a handful of times in the last decade. More often than not, if we get to the point where a CDAA declaration is issued, we're probably looking at trying to get a major declaration as well. The other item I would add here before wrapping up is that FEMA has recently moved the application and management of this process into FEMA Go. That is not the same as FEMA Grants Portal. So even if you're working in public assistance on major disaster decks in Grants Portal, for FMAGs, the application and management of your projects is in the FEMA Go system. That was just implemented last year. We don't have a ton of experience with it, so can't really talk through the challenges or pitfalls of it. But we know there will be some growing pains as we learn a new system for managing these events. So what I would leave you with, again, you're going to get copies of these slide deck, so you'll have this information, but these are all of the FMAG contacts within our recovery unit. You can reach out to any of them. The email at the bottom is the recovery general inbox. Highly recommend, if you have a question that you don't know who to send it to, but it is recovery related, send it there. They will route it to the right folks. And with that, I am finished. If we want to open it up for any questions.
Thank you, Chief, for the presentation. We greatly appreciate it. We have about 5 minutes for questions, so feel free to ask if you have one. Chief Cox, go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay, I just switched devices. Not a question, but a comment that I forgot to mention in my presentation. FMAGs are approved county by county. So the way we do it is we request each county. If a fire is burning in multiple counties, it doesn't mean the entire fire is going to be approved for an FMAG. And we do have many fires that burn across county lines. So each county that has a threat that would like to be considered would be submitted on a separate application. I just wanted to throw that one out there as a point that I forgot to cover.
All right, thank you for bringing that up, Chief. We have one question on the chat. So from Lisa Cox, I'm getting mixed up whether or not this is a mitigation grant or a recovery grant.
So this is a recovery grant. It is not mitigation, but it is the way Chief describes it. You're really only working after the fact on it, but on those from the perspective of trying to make sure we prevent it from becoming a major disaster deck. That's the entire purpose of the FMAG grant program. But when it comes down to the reimbursement, how it's processed, it is a recovery grant. So you don't need to have a current mitigation plan. It is a disaster grant in that sense, where if you have impacts, if your jurisdiction is approved for it, you're eligible for the reimbursement costs associated that are eligible under the program.
Fantastic. Thank you, Chief. All right. Not seeing any more questions. We can move on with the California Utilities Emergency Association. We have Dana Moore. Do we have Dana Moore online with CUEA? Okay, we'll keep a spot open for Dana whenever she has a chance. Moving on, CalOES Homeland Security Division. Do we have Christina Derungs or LeAnn Gajunia?
Hi, give us one moment. Tina had to switch over to my cube. Teams is not being friendly with her, so we'll be sharing a screen here. And let me pop up the slides.
Thank you for being flexible, LeAnn. Appreciate it.
No worries. We really appreciate you guys inviting us. Okie dokie. Can y'all see the slides?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. All right. Let me just switch it on to here. Right.
All right. So thank you for bearing with us. That was a little bit of a panic. My teams went out. Anyway, so we would just like to introduce you to the school security program. Next slide. So our CalOES school security program is housed within the California State Threat Assessment Center. Next slide. And it is staffed by myself, Tina Derungs, and my partner in crime,
LeAnn Gajunia. We like to say we're a mighty team of two.
Yes. Next slide. So our school security program focuses on, well, it's paid for by a Department of Justice, BJA, Student Teachers and Officers Preventing School Violence grant. We are currently in our second grant, and this grant is meant to fund tools to teachers and first responders, which would help prevent violence on K through 12 schools. This grant mainly focuses on 4 different areas: the development and operation of school technology and solutions. So things like anonymous reporting systems or alert systems, and then educating students on how to prevent school violence. We focus on the 2 middle ones, the development and implementation of multidisciplinary behavioral threat assessment and intervention teams, which I'm going to now refer to as BTAM teams, behavioral threat assessment and management, and then training school personnel and first responders to prevent school violence. Next slide. So our program was initiated with the 2018 grant. That grant established the school safety coordinator position, and then we also established 3 pilot projects in 3 different counties to assess what were the best practices in school security. And what came out of that grant was the school site vulnerability assessments, the use of behavioral threat assessment and management teams, and then training on active assailant response for school staff. We didn't really want to go into the realm of students. We have a question.
Sorry, hi, it's Dana Moore. I'm back on. I didn't realize you had moved on. So anyway, thanks.
Okay. All right. So around 2019, 2020, our school safety coordinator position became permanent. So that's something that is now not grant dependent in the stack. We will always have a school safety coordinator. And then in 2022, we received another grant, and we utilized that grant to establish a second position, which is LeAnn's. And then we subawarded funds to 3 fusion centers to provide school trainings. Those fusion centers are the Orange County Intelligence and Assessment Center, the Central California Intelligence Center, and the Northern California Regional Intelligence Center. They're providing trainings such as behavioral threat assessment and management, school site vulnerability assessment. So they're training first responders and school administrators on how to do those school site vulnerability assessments. And then they also have a training which is an emergency response to active assailant on campus. That's a great training. It encompasses not only kind of the history of BTAM and the utilization of BTAM teams in schools, but also it's got some targeted violence information in there. They're training in the course of that day, stop the bleed, and then also how to, they run some scenarios about how to respond to active assailants. So what we do here in our office is, I'm going to start down at the bottom with the subawarding grants to the fusion centers. Because there's only 2 of us, we needed some help with the training aspect of it. So we reached out to our fusion centers. They have a much wider reach than we do. So we do that. In our office, we have the capacity. It was just 2 people until last week, but we have the capacity to train behavioral threat assessment and management. Last week, 4 more people completed that training, the train the trainer training. And so now we have 6 at our disposal, which means that not only can we just train schools, but now we have the capacity to train other agencies or organizations or people within CalOES. We do trainings not necessarily always to establish behavioral threat assessment teams, but just to teach about the suspicious activity reporting and to educate people about targeted violence indicators and the pathway to violence. In our unit, we also have the capacity to do the vulnerability assessments for schools. Once those vulnerability assessment trainings take place with the fusion centers, then we like to contact especially the law enforcement that's taken that training, generally the SROs, and we will offer to shadow them as they do their first trainings. As we all know, a lot of people, sometimes we tend to take trainings and then we don't utilize that skill, but these vulnerability assessments are pretty important to our schools. So we want to encourage our school administrators and officers to go out and do those vulnerability assessments. And we're more than happy to tag along and help with those. Also, if there's a situation where a school needs a vulnerability assessment like now and a fusion center isn't available or they can't find somebody else to do it, we have a good assessment team here. It's in the stack. It's our SIP team, Critical Infrastructure Protection, and those guys are always very generous and helpful in kind of doing last-minute assessments for us in the school community. We also do a lot of interagency partner collaboration at all different levels of the government. And we try to educate about the state threat assessment system, specifically SARS, suspicious activity reports, and the importance of submitting those. And we keep schools informed on identified threat trends. So even though our portfolio is K through 12, if we identify something that kind of flows over into that higher education level, then we engage with them as well. So we have contacts with them. Generally, we will provide that information through the K through 12, through the County Superintendents Association, and then through the California Department of Education. And then we have contacts at the higher education levels as well. These are a couple of the publications that we have, and LeAnn's going to kind of talk you through a couple that we've done. But something that we've also done with these publications is many times they have sensitive information in them, and so we can only provide them to certain people, maybe superintendents, law enforcement. Maybe sometimes they'll go to the school resource officers, of course, or anybody who's doing security. Maybe sometimes they'll go to the principals. So one of the things that we've started doing is rewriting some of these publications, taking out the sensitive information so that that information can go down most definitely to principals, sometimes to teachers. And even we're kind of exploring the possibility of rewriting some of the things so that they can go to parents as well, so that we can kind of widen our breadth of education. But now LeAnn's going to talk about the publications.
Yeah, thank you, Tina. And just to add on to that, we do, we realize that schools are uniquely positioned to identify certain warning behavior signs, and we just wanted to give them the tools and empower them to know how to identify and report them to the appropriate contacts. So I think this last August, we released a K-12 school safety bulletin on violent online networks and their threat to children and teens. And if you are not familiar, these violent online networks, also referred as online nihilistic violent extremist networks, NVEs, these particular groups, they share a deep grievance and hostility towards society as a whole and seek to destroy it through widespread chaos, violence, and disorder. And the unfortunate common tactic we're seeing with these online violent networks is that they target and exploit vulnerable minors to coerce them into committing and sharing footage of self-harm, animal cruelty, child sexual abuse material, and potentially their own suicide. And as you can see in our bulletin here, we just share a brief threat overview of the threat that we're seeing and the possible indicators of victimization. So whether that be fresh cuts, specifically if it's someone's name, suicidal ideation, idealizations of different violent extremist groups, and different symbology associated with that. And so the important also to note, possible indicator is whether there's actually an individual online that's coercing the student into participating in these acts is a big indicator as well. And we also have recommendations for for various K through 12 schools, such as implementing classroom management software to monitor online student activity that may be going on their Chromebooks, and the importance of establishing behavioral threat assessment and management team. We also include additional resources and reporting mechanisms if they were to come across possible indicators of victimization. And so in November 2025, we released a higher education safety advisory. And just as Tina alluded earlier, oh, sorry if you hear a printer going on. I sit right next to the office printer, so apologies. And just as Tina alluded earlier, even though we are a K through 12 specific program, we do have partners outside of within higher ed. And so particularly in this case, this bulletin titled International Students at California Universities Targeted in a Financial Scheme. So in this particular threat, you have bad actors impersonating as authoritative figures, whether they are law enforcement in a foreign country or governmental personnel, and they would utilize false criminal charges and threats of arrest. And they use urgency and fear, secrecy and obstruction of privacy into exploiting these international students into sending thousands and thousands of dollars. And then we have here listed different common tactics used and different mechanisms on how to report. And next, I'm going to discuss the importance of suspicious activity reporting. For these, I love to ask those in attendance if they are familiar with fusion centers and such as suspicious activity reportings. And I know I can't see y'all, but if anyone's familiar with it, if you could give like a thumbs up or like a little reaction. Because it's just interesting to see who knows. Okay, I see a couple thumbs up.
Wow,
Awesome. Okay,
yay.
that makes us very happy. But to those who are unaware, fusion centers, they were pretty much born out of the tragic 9/11 attacks. We learned in the 9/11 Commission reports that there was a lacking in information sharing within the state, the federal, state, local law enforcement community. And so in pretty much every state, they have at least one. And as you could see with California being as big as it is, we have 5 different ones, and with the STAC, the State Threat Assessment Center, being its primary fusion center. And so the importance of these suspicious activity reports, they really help fill in the gap of those particular activities and behaviors that don't meet an immediate 911 call. It's not an emergency. They don't meet, it's not like criminal activity that would warrant you calling the cops. So if there's an emergency, just want to make sure with everyone, call 911. That's ours. So suspicious activity is any observed behavior that may indicate pre-operational planning associated with terrorism or terrorism-related crime or behaviors, activity. And so I know throughout the call, we have a lot of representation throughout the state. And if you take note on the right side of the slide, there are different fusion centers and areas of responsibility. I think in the last slide, we have the link to the actual STAS website, where you can take a look at this map, click on whatever county you reside in, and it'll lead you right to your regional fusion center. And there you'll be able to make a suspicious activity report. And just to note, if you do need to report something that occupies more than one area of responsibility, so more than one fusion center area, please direct that to the State Threat Assessment Center, as this would help us deconflict any duplication of efforts and just to improve situational awareness as a whole. So I think this leads to our, there we go.
And just as a final note for anybody out there, any of our CalOES teams, if you would like to have a training, not necessarily for behavioral threat assessment and management teams, but just maybe like a 1 to 2 hour training on targeted violence indicators, pathway to violence, just things to look for, and SAR reporting, we will be more than happy to come out and do that. Now that we've expanded our capacity to train, we would be more than happy to do that for our CalOES partners.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have our contact information here as well. And I guess just to reiterate, our program is more so focused on those man-made threats versus we do have another school safety program here that focuses on natural disasters and such. But just to make sure, I don't know if I said that clear enough at the beginning, but more so on those natural made disasters. So please reach out if you have any questions. And thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much for presenting. And does anybody have any questions before we move on to our next presenter? Ready? Seeing none and hearing none. Thank you so much, Tina and LeAnn. We will be moving on to California Utilities Emergency Association with Dana.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Loud and clear.
Fantastic. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. I can find the Teams thing again. Here we go. All right. All right. Can you see a PowerPoint?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So I'm Dana Moore. I am the Executive Director for the California Utilities Emergency Association. And on this call as well is Sarah Canchola. She is my counterpart in Southern California. So for our association, we only have 2 full-time staff. CUEA has been around since 1952. So next year we will be celebrating 75 years. We started in the 50s as part of the Civil Defense Act and really looking at just the gas and electric infrastructure for the state. Over time, we continued our work with mutual aid or mutual assistance, since we've largely just supported private entities because mutual aid is not available to private companies like it is for public entities. In 1998, we became an association, a nonprofit, and we were a limited liability corporation. So that kind of changed our role a little bit, but not much. And so basically what we do is we represent the 6 critical infrastructure utilities in California. So that's water, wastewater, gas, electric, telecommunications, and petroleum pipeline. For electricity, for those of you that don't know, so there is investor-owned utilities like PG&E, Southern California Edison. There are municipal utilities like Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. And then there are sort of a mix of hydroelectric, and those are often seen as an irrigation district, not necessarily a provider of electricity, even though that is something they do. Gas companies, again, investor owned as well as municipal. Waters, which we'll go into more detail in this presentation, is really quite complex. There's municipal water, there's investor-owned water, which is also small mutual companies or families. There are water co-ops with several water entities, special districts, which some are public, some are private. And then, of course, there are individual wells and small water systems. So water is pretty complex. We also represent wastewater, which has a different set of regulatory systems and different infrastructure. For example, in a disaster, if systems are impacted, particularly water systems, wastewater always has to be below drinking water. And when we talk about water, most often we think about potable water, the general drinking water, but water can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different entities. Telecommunications, so often when we think of that, we think of Comcast, Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile. But we also have a network of small rural telephone systems, TDS telephones. So they have outposts in Happy Valley and really small rural areas throughout the state. So they're also key members of ours because of their rural locale. So in addition to mutual assistance, we also provide some 6 buckets of critical work. So we co-lead a critical lifelines work group, and the word lifelines is very intentional because it has a lot of relevance and impact around the ability to get reimbursement and funding. It's a term that the feds use. So right now, Sarah, as our Southern California representative, has been very actively engaged in a Southern California Critical Lifelines work group. And basically, it's all of those 6 critical infrastructure utility sectors I spoke about. And all of these entities are working together to really trying to look at where there are opportunities to collaborate, where there are redundancies, and where there are gaps. LA is massive. I mean, they have 290 water systems in LA alone. And so the general idea, as well as in my experience in public health preparedness and response, is in general, if you can get LA 100% prepared or whatever that looks like, you can kind of get it done anywhere. We have been a very close partner to CalOES. It's been an important relationship for decades. And as leadership has changed, as the board, CUEA is run by a 13-member board. As our board has changed, as CalOES leadership has changed, our organization and connections has definitely morphed over time. But the one thing that's really remained consistent is that we are the representative for Emergency Support Function 12 utilities. And we'll talk a little more about that. Part of our role is to help utilities meet mandates. So for those of you who don't know, any water system that has 2,999 connections or less is required to be part of a mutual assistance or mutual aid system. So we help fulfill that mandate. We also provide technical assistance testimony. I know some people are more familiar with 501c4s and C6s as lobbying entities. CUEA does not take positions on bills. However, because we are connected to the 6 critical infrastructure lifelines, because we connect at the local level, regional level, and state level when it comes to municipalities, we provide very fact-based or case study based testimony. So that's been a very new part of our role. I've brought that to the table, having been inside state government and kind of understanding the importance of neutral facts in a situation like that. We are also developing a utilities unified multi-agency coordination guide. Many utilities have something like this, but it's very siloed and it is very specific to the kind of utility it is. So think back to those water entities. So what CUEA does is we bring all 6 of those entities together and we can kind of do a crosswalk of how do we work together at the SOC? How do we, CUEA, support our locals because all disasters are local? And you'll learn a little bit more about why utilities have a big challenge around what's defined as a utility. And then that kind of goes over here into cross-sector coordination. So CUEA is the only organization like this in the country. No other state or territory has a CUEA. Most states rely on the American Public Power Association or the American Waterworks Association. But those 2, again, are very siloed and specific to their industry. So CUEA has this really, really critical role. So we went over members and stakeholders. So we're really excited as Sarah and I have come together. Everything we learned from the fires. Sarah's second day on the job was actually heading over to the Rose Bowl Incident Command Post to be part of the response and represent our member utilities and feed information to me so that I could provide information to CalOES. We're excited that our members are going to have a dashboard that helps them coordinate mutual assistance and mutual aid, as well as just stay connected. This is something that most associations have. Some of it is public, but largely it's a membership-driven site with content. So I wanted to share with you where CUEA is going in terms of stakeholders. So we have always represented Emergency Services Function 12, utilities, but the definition of utilities is gas and electric. But telecoms is in ESF 2, and then you have water and wastewater in ESF 10. However, when we speak about utilities at a department operations center, at a local EOC, and sometimes at the SOC, the general perception is it's utilities writ large. That utilities means gas, electric, water, telecoms. I mean, when we think about your utility bill, you know, you think about all of those things, but when it comes to emergency preparedness, response, and recovery, water is not seen as a utility. Telecoms is its own thing. It's not in the umbrella of utility. And for good reason. However, that makes CUEA's role as this sort of convener, coordinator, even more important to be able to cross all of those different areas of preparedness, response, and recovery. So these are just some visuals about water systems. So it's showing that we have public water, we have private water, and then if you look into the public system alone, there's even further definitions. So water is incredibly fractured. California has 7,700 water systems in our state, and that's a lot of water systems to manage. So when we talk about communications and requests, this is just very high level. So drawing your attention to, on the right side of the screen is mutual assistance, and the left side is mutual aid. So we'll start with mutual assistance because this is really the most critical service that we provide our members. So this is investor-owned utility. Anything that's investor-owned, and that's including the mutuals, even though they're 501c6, because any money coming to them from CalOES or FEMA would be considered a gift of public funds, and they are not eligible for that funding, even though they may be the only water system in an area. So the investor-owned utility, almost all utilities have their own internal MOUs with other utilities. Generally, it's the same kind of utility. And then for water, there's an organization called CalWarn, and it's essentially the Water Alert and Response Network. It is a free entity. Every state has one. However, because it is completely volunteer run, most of the volunteers that are currently engaged are kind of ending their career journeys. And, you know, there's some question about sustainability, and it's an important organization. So CUEA is partnering in that realm. And then the Western Region Mutual Aid group is gas and electric. So again, you kind of see this bifurcation of utilities and mutual assistance. So then in addition to kind of what's happening at this local level, sometimes water is included at the city or county EOC. Sometimes it is not. If there's large public water systems, more likely to be included at the city or county EOC or DOC. If it's private, it is very likely they will not be included at all, because they are seen as a small business, not as a critical lifeline utility. So that's where, as you see the arrow, CUEA comes in, and we are able to make some of those connections. Also, we are able to provide bigger picture perspective and provide voice to those entities so that we can more accurately inform leadership of the SOC and the JFO, because we have those direct connections on the ground that government otherwise wouldn't have. Coming to the next side, mutual aid. So this is the thing I think everybody on this call is much more familiar with. You know, very similar in terms of internal MOUs, CalWarn, Western Region. It's just they're better connected, or more likely to be connected to the city EOC, county EOC, and they really fit in with the structure that currently exists and is meant to be. So just thought I'd show that so you can understand where CUEA fits in to that infrastructure when it comes to water. But it is also quite similar, like example, the 2025 fires, Southern California Edison worked with PG&E as their primary source of mutual assistance because they are a private company. Because LADWP is a member organization with CUEA, they can then do their own mutual assistance because it's an organizational internal MOU, as opposed to a government and private entity MOU. So CUEA is really expanding our membership into the water sector. Historically, CUEA has not had a good relationship with the water sector. And I think largely because of the definition of utility being only gas and electric. I have a 21-year background in public health at the state, local, and regional level, and with rural and urban health departments. So water is something, to me, that is critically important when we think about utilities. So the challenge that right now we are trying to help California's water system overcome is the fact that water sits in many roles. So in some counties, it sits under public health, and sometimes public health sits under a health director. So that's an administrative role, whereas public health is a health officer, and that's an enforcement role. But then some jurisdictions, water is under municipalities or any kind of more public utility infrastructure. And then in other counties where it's largely ag, you have irrigation districts that provide a completely different service, and irrigation districts might be somewhere else in the org chart. So the hard part for water companies is that it's inconsistent, and every jurisdiction is different. Every jurisdiction has a multitude of water companies that they have to manage, and it's highly likely that they wouldn't know. So this is an example, San Diego County, we work a lot with them because we have San Diego Gas and Electric. And also we have some colleagues that have from the area that are just much more familiar. And so what I wanted to point out here as an example where I think water is seen as a utility. I mean, you see energy here, you see SDG&E, Caltrans. Utilities are part of ESF1 because the entire utility infrastructure is mostly buried under the roads we drive on and the sidewalks we walk on. And then there's also the municipality or municipal infrastructure. So this to CUEA is a really great example of having all those utilities front and center as part of the operational mission. So I actually was speaking at the Association of California Water Agencies last week and sharing with them why isn't water always at the table. And so the other thing that's can be a challenge is that every county has a different version of what these SEMS charts look like, and every county is technically compliant, but not every county includes water, gas, electric, and telecoms and wastewater in the same way at the same level. So CUEA provides a really important service to our member agencies because we're able to elevate those utility issues that aren't at the forefront. We're able to unify and coordinate our utilities where otherwise there isn't any, and we can provide voice in all of the appropriate arenas. So this is also from San Diego, and I shared with the water companies that this is a really good comprehensive list, but also this is a list of stakeholders that are all at the table. And every county is different. And so part of what CUEA is trying to do as we move forward in our organization's existence is to make closer connections with the local EOCs, local OES, but we also need to be able to help our utilities connect with this other types of critical infrastructure. So for those of you that aren't familiar with the Public Health Response Readiness Framework, this is what the CDC has essentially been doing since 9/11, when public health went from just epidemiology and health education to becoming the lead essentially in most public health, in most emergencies and emergency response and planning, because everything is connected to public health. And so some ways that utilities can connect into this framework, which I see as a Venn diagram with the state emergency plan and local emergency management systems, and then you have public health, and then utilities can kind of sit in that nice space between, because these different areas really overlap both parts of the system. And why I bring up public health again is that many water entities are under public health and not in a different area where they'll be recognized. So something else that I think is really important to understand is that there's been a lot of conversations for decades about water not being able to get past security lines sooner, gas and electric getting right away. So Purdue, UCLA, and some other universities have done some studies, and we even saw it in Paradise and real life situations. If water gets in, this should really say between 5 to 30 days from safety to be able to go back to their water systems, water companies have an opportunity to get their systems up within a matter of months. So we're saying like 3 to 10 months if they can get in at the same time that gas and electric get in. If they get in significantly later, water systems won't be up for another 1 to 3 years. So what we are trying to do as part of our efforts to coordinate with local EMS, local emergency management, as opposed to emergency medical, what we are trying to do is raise this issue that it is an academic study. It has been proven time and again. The faster water gets in, if water gets in with gas and electric, the community can have potable drinking water faster. And there's a lot that goes into getting a water system up. Sarah and I have had to become water engineer experts overnight from the 2025 fires. And so that was also very eye-opening. With gas and electric, especially electric, I think most people here know about public safety power shutoff. So there's a lot more government connections, especially at the OES level, with the electric companies. So even though we coordinate with them, they have sort of a system and network that is very specific to them, whereas telecommunications and water, wastewater, is a little bit disjointed, and where CUEA fills in those gaps. So when I was talking to our water entities, something to think about, and I share this with you, for those of you who work with local entities, Office of Emergency Services, as we think about updating statewide plans, where is water? We've encouraged water companies now to connect with their local Office of Emergency Services, to connect with their local health departments, to really understand where they fit in the SEM structure of critical infrastructure. They need to understand their mutual assistance mechanisms. So like I showed earlier, mutual assistance is for all private entities, anything that's not public. And again, the risk and the unfortunate setup of the structure is they really aren't eligible for a lot of funding. And so Sarah and I try really hard to figure out how we can provide them the support, knowing they are likely not to get FEMA funds. So that is it. This is my contact info. I can put it in the chat. And that is it for CUEA. I appreciate the opportunity to share with you about our organization, and happy to take questions.
All right, fantastic. Thanks, Dana. Cole, you can go ahead.
Yeah, hi Dana. Thanks for the presentation. This is Cole Glenwright with the CalOES Incident Management Assistance Team. Curious if you could talk a little bit more about that connection between faster access to the fire zone and faster potable water restoration. I've been involved in this issue for a few years, Campfire, Lahaina, and others, and never seen that parallel, but I'm curious how you see that connection working.
Oh, absolutely. I highly recommend you look at the studies out of UCLA and Purdue. The EPA and other sort of public health, environmental health entities have been citing that research for quite some time. And so basically what happens is that the water system has to get turned off, and then it settles, turn it back on, flush it, and you do this over and over again. After the Tubbs fire in Santa Rosa, it was the first time that the water industry saw that there were toxic levels of benzene in the water. And for those of you who aren't quite familiar, it's because the pipes and everything else melts into the system. For a water system to come back up to be safe, they have to do 185 samples within the same probably hour time frame. Those 185 samples get set off to be tested. If one comes up positive, the system fails. All 185 have to come up. So I think Vicki can also provide some context. Thank you. I didn't know you were on the call.
You know me, I get around. So Cole, this kind of even before that. So the study has to do with getting systems, but for us, this has been an access issue even before that. When the power goes off, we still have to start manually purging miles and miles of valves and such to keep water flowing. And there's times when we can't get access. This happened in Paradise and etc. So this study kind of backs that up. I mean, it goes even beforehand. If we can't keep the water flowing, we can't keep the wet stuff on the red stuff. So this is something where I know Zach was on the call. I don't know if he's still on. I would love to see us sit down with the IMTs, all 6 of them, talk about the study that Dana has, and see if we can get an agency rep so we can make sure that this access thing, it happened in 2025 again. It happened at the Campfire. It happened in LA County again. So we can try to make sure that this doesn't continue to happen. So we can make sure we're working alongside, because a lot of people forget that, yeah, we're the silent partners behind that work alongside fire during a fire. So that's where this access point is. A lot of people understand then how long it takes to get the water industry back online. So that's really what Dana's study that she's talking about talks about, is how long and and the 259 chemicals we have to test for every time. We could go on for hours and give you all the science that you want, but we won't. But this starts already from the beginning onset of getting access even beforehand to make sure the water keeps flowing. So this is a whole encompass thing to ensure the faster we can get and protect our infrastructure, the faster we can get it in even before it burns down, because we might be able to protect it before that.
And part of that too is, I think everybody here knows that moment one of the disaster is also moment one of recovery. And so again, recovery is gas and electric. No, it's gas, electric, and water. And I know even at the federal level, I think internet isn't included as a utility, but telecoms is. But today's age, telecoms and internet are the exact same thing. So again, as a system, we need to look upstream and reevaluate what a utility is and how water can get in on that. Because CUEA sits at the SOC, we really we can cross those lines. I know when we think about SEMS and the structure, you know, you don't have ESF 8 health hanging out with ESF 2 telecoms. So CUEA has this really awesome fluidity to bring those together and have a utilities desk, so to speak, so that we can help facilitate this restoration across all utilities.
We used to have the water desk, Cole. Now we need to go back and rewrite it. And we actually talked about last year, CSA rewriting that whole training, that water desk to be a utility desk and a true that can not only be used at the SOC, but even let the local ELCs use that also for help with more utilities coordination. So it's more streamlined.
Absolutely. The local would be best. That's a good priority. All right, I see other hands. Thank you, Vicki.
Hi, this is Suzette Bricker with Pechanga. How does the tribal
Yes.
nation fill in here?
So Suzette, thank you so much. First, when I was at the California Department of Public Health, I had the distinct honor of being the tribal coordinator. And it was an incredibly humbling experience. So from the perspective of tribes, I would like to get together and have a tribal work group so we can better understand, because I think being a sovereign nation, you have some ability to connect with the federal government that's different. But what I think the most important part is, and correct me if I'm wrong, because often the tribal entities are not included. And because you're not a municipality or you're not, I hate to say this, but it's like you're special in your own way.
We're forgotten.
You are. Tribes are forgotten all the time. And especially
we're not even part of
because
SEMS.
Okay, so Suzette, please reach out. It's very important to me, especially when I look at the public safety power shutoff in Southern California, and it's like 35 tribes and then like a little bit of regular land.
We have the Southern California Tribal Emergency Managers Group.
Okay.
That would probably be a great place for you to come and speak with our group.
I would absolutely love that.
As a tribal nation that has water, has electricity.
Yep.
We need to be included in these conversations.
Absolutely, 100%. And I know too, like I don't know if that also then kind of gets to some of the urban areas, but probably more the rest of the state where you do have your own encompassing system that you're trying to keep people alive and healthy and safe like everybody else is. So yes, send me an email.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we have one more from Chrisanta.
Hi, thanks for the presentation, Dana. With San Bernardino County being one of the largest county in the United States, it makes it difficult to get all the special districts, all the water districts together. And I would love to have that conversation with you on kind of doing the same thing you did at San Diego County, but here in San Bernardino County, and how do we integrate all these special districts with public health, environmental health, and and we're building out our new EOC structure as an ESF structure. So I think this is good timing. So if you could just reach out to me when you have some time, or I can reach out to you.
Yep.
I'm sure your name is on the slide. So thank you for your time, and I'd like to keep this conversation going for San Bernardino County.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Ernie, and something else too that I think Vicki hinted at that I should have been more explicit about. So for those of you who don't know, water needs electricity, right? To get moving, generators, to get pumps going. And again, as Vicki said, it's to get the wet stuff and the red stuff. And for those of you who also don't know, California's water infrastructure was built for a general structure fire. So when we think like hook up to the hydrants, that's putting out the fire of like 1, maybe 2 or 3 houses. Fire hydrants and the systems underneath them are not built for absolutely raging urban wildland interface wildfires. And so there's a lot of misconception there. And so the other piece is getting the utilities together to really understand that crossover in infrastructure. And water companies have water tenders. There's a lot of other things that there's kind of redundancy, good redundancy across utilities. So Chrysanta, again, in that realm, having that conversation, I think would be wonderful. Alex.
Dana, thank you so much for the presentation. I just want to make myself available for you. And since Suzette mentioned it, our CalOES Office of Tribal Coordination can or would be happy to facilitate that type of conversation with our tribal nation across the state.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. I will email you, or I will share my email contact in the chat for you, just to stay in touch.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Other questions or comments, thoughts that you think would be worth sharing with our membership and our stakeholders and partners? Okay. I'm always here. Sarah's in Southern California. Vicki and I are basically attached at the hip. And that is actually something that's relatively new. CUEA didn't work with CalWarn in the past, and Vicki and I are making sure that we connect as often as possible. You know, Vicki is always, I'm always learning from Vicki more and more about water and the complexities. And, you know, because our board is made up of 13 members of multiple different types of utilities, the CUEA board is just an amazing space to bring up these massive upstream critical infrastructure questions and sort of quagmires. Complex problems often have complex solutions. And the more we can understand the local level and the inner workings, anything that I don't know is much appreciated. I like to be surrounded by people who are much smarter than I am so that I can keep learning. So thank you.
Thank you very much for your time, Dana. We really appreciate it. And it's been mentioned in the chat before. We received the slides and we will distribute them once we have the video ready.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. And moving on, we have UC Davis School of Veterinary Medicine, Joseph Gendreau. Start your presentation whenever.
Yeah, thank you. Here, let me get the share working here. Are you able to see that?
Yes, we can. We can hear you loud and clear.
All right, great. Thank you. So yeah, hi everyone. Thanks so much for the opportunity to present to you today. So yeah, my name is Joseph Gendreau. I work at the Cooperative Extension Poultry Lab at the UC Davis School of Veterinary Medicine. So normally our job is focused on food safety, epizootic diseases, things like that. But because we're an extension lab, another part of our job is to help provide resources to backyard poultry and by extension livestock owners across the state for emergency preparedness and poultry health and things like that. And so a couple of years back when we had some bad fires, we had an idea to try and gather up all of this information for all these resources for these backyard poultry and livestock owners on where they could bring their animals in the case of an evacuation, some emergency resources like veterinarians, feed and water information, those kind of things for them. And what we realized while we were trying to put all of that together is that there wasn't really a cohesive list anywhere for us to pull from, or a cohesive sort of site that had this information across the state, all of the evacuation centers or shelters, and where to go and those sorts of things. So because of that, we ended up, let's see if I can make it change slides here. So because of that, we ended up submitting a grant through the USDA Smith Lever Special Needs Grant Program, and we were awarded it. And this grant, the main goal of it is to provide a centralized emergency resource for backyard livestock and poultry owners in California, Oregon, and Hawaii in the form of a mobile application that will kind of cohesively take all of these siloed resources and put them together in one place. Currently, we're mainly focusing on the California aspect of this project still, because California is a bit more organized than Oregon or Hawaii at this point in terms of having these, county by county evacuation shelter plans. So that's what we're focusing on. And this overall framework will sort of have two portions of it. So during a disaster, the app is meant to provide the nearest evacuation center location. That's kind of the main focus of the project to the backyard poultry and livestock owners, so they know where to go. They have a fire, earthquake, what have you. We need to evacuate, bring our animals somewhere. They can just look up the nearest location to them that's open and has availability and accepts their species, and then they'll take their animals there. In addition to that, we'll have veterinarians, lists of veterinarians that treat the species specifically. So it's a species specific list of veterinarians. We have some utilities like go bag checklists, feed and water calculators. And at the request of the Oregon Department of Agriculture, we're adding in this functionality that lets them request help evacuating animals during a disaster. I live up in Oregon actually most of the time, and we had some pretty significant fires up in northwestern Oregon a few years ago, and that was one of the issues that we had up here was people weren't really able to request help evacuating some of their larger livestock. So that's the livestock and poultry owner portion of this. Another aspect that we're working on adding is a dashboard that allows sort of the folks on the call, emergency managers, first responders, those sorts of folks, to update capacities and availability at the shelters that we have listed, and showing those on the little pins on the map. So we don't want someone driving to a shelter that's full or doesn't accept the species they have, or even worse is not available because it's threatened by the ongoing disaster, like the fire is coming towards it, right? In addition to that, we'll also put in a way for those managing the disaster or managing the emergency to communicate with those backyard poultry and livestock owners. So that'll be like an alert or an in-app message. It'll be a broad dissemination across to everyone that has the application, so you can blast something out to everybody at once, like, hey, don't come to this place, or hey, this portion of the county is, you need to start moving your animals now. And then going back to that request functionality that we were asked to include, so those will all be provided to the dashboard where the people managing the emergency will see them and then can allocate resources accordingly, right? So right now we have the core functionalities done. So the mapping's finished and tested. We've been testing that for the past couple months. We have a fairly robust list in California with volunteers from the CVMA. And our little utilities, the feed and water calculator, the checklists, they're functional and working. We've been testing those. We are working on some technical improvements. So the supplemental information I mentioned, capacity, species accepted, things like that. We're working on some basic filtering and searching of that list of volunteers from the CVMA, feed and water types, and then that entire site that I mentioned, the dashboard that the folks managing the incident will be using. And then in addition to those technical improvements, we really need all of the locations across California that are typically used for emergency shelters for livestock and poultry. We have a couple in Northern California, but it's been kind of difficult for us to get the rest of them. And that's partially because all of this information is very siloed at a county or even smaller level. And in addition to that, more vets that want to participate and be, on our list of veterinarians that will treat different species. So what we could use help with, what folks on the call might be able to help us with, is whatever. So if you're a local county level or smaller emergency management office, we would love to have your locations where you typically ask people to bring their animals, so we can add them to the database. You can get all of the species accepted and capacity, things like that in there. We'd also like some guidance on what you would use and actually like to see on that dashboard. We're just a small team of 3 folks, 2 programmers making this, so we want to make it as useful and as helpful as possible to sort of facilitate these evacuations for these backyard and poultry owners during an outbreak, and make it easier for you to sort of lower the amount of effort it takes to help these folks. We're going to have this available for external testing soon, so if you'd like to take a look at it and kind of rip apart our design and tell us what we're doing wrong, that would be great. You can send us an email and we'll send you a link to download it. And then eventually we'd also like to be running simulated disaster exercises, and we'll probably start doing this once we have this app ready for external testing, but obviously it'd be much better if we had or much more comprehensive, that to say, if we had the dashboard set up and we could kind of use both sides of this project, where people are in the simulated exercise, people are requesting help, and folks on the call could help us, answer those requests through the dashboard and kind of see how it works, if it's effective, if it's what needs changed, that kind of thing. So kind of a short presentation for you, but if you have any questions, comments, or you'd like to participate, I think we have some time to talk about that, or you can email me at jdgendreau@ucdavis.edu.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Joseph. We appreciate your time. Does anybody have any questions? Any questions, comments, or concerns before we move on? Alrighty, hearing none. Do we have Andrew Mattson on the call for his presentation? Nope. Before that, Zachary Corbo, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry about that. Couldn't find my raise hand fast enough. Question for you. Is there going to be an effort to update the app to include folks that aren't necessarily commercial farms, poultry, livestock, more of a pets and dogs, cats and animals sort of work?
So we haven't, so first of all, what I'll say is this is specifically for non-commercial livestock and poultry. So people that have some small ruminants, maybe a cow or two, some horses or chickens for poultry labs. So we always focus on the chickens in their backyard, and they need to get them out, move them. We haven't really talked about cats and dogs, partially because the way the grant works, it doesn't include, companion animals. It's food animal related. But if we have some sufficient participation and everything, I don't see why we wouldn't do that. It's pretty easy, I would say, to add in those other animals. It's just not our focus because of the funding source at the moment. Thanks.
Thank you, Joseph, and thank you, Zachary, for the question. I have a note for the Earthquake Tsunami program that they want to add some comments. So if we have Christopher White or anybody on his team ready to talk about their program, you can go ahead. Hearing nothing from the team, it's a guide and checklist to non-structural earthquake hazards in schools. We will include it in the package that we will be sending out. We just received. Okay, now we can move on with Andrew Mattson with CalOES 911 Emergency Communications Branch.
Hey, thanks, Mitch. Hey, everybody. All right, let's jump in here. Thanks for letting me come on. Sorry I was not on the meeting that everybody was on here. I was working on my day job, so I understand we're a little bit ahead of schedule. So glad to be here. Glad to be able to present and talk to you folks about what's going on in 911 and NextGen 911. I do not have any slides today, just so everyone knows. I'm gonna use the website a little bit for some informational purposes, but I don't have slides to present. Wouldn't have been able to get them approved in time from executive. So what I want to do is I want to give you a little bit of a background on where 911 has been, where we are now, and where we're headed. Should be a pretty brief discussion. I think we have about a half an hour scheduled, so I'll give you the information we've got, and then if you have any questions or any sort of comments or anything like that, we can definitely get into that. So again, my name is Andrew Mattson. I am the Program Management Division Chief here in the 911 Emergency Communications Branch at OES. Part of Public Safety Communications. I've been with the branch for going on 20 years this year. So I've served in a various number of roles here in the office, all within 911 though. And currently right now I'm basically in charge of all things non-technical. So finance, contracts, legal, regulatory, etc. So happy to give an update today. Let's just jump right in. So now 911 in 2019, we kicked off our project in earnest for NextGen. What we were going to do is we're going to take 911 from a legacy copper-based environment, point-to-point circuits, we call them camera trunks, legacy outdated technology. We're going to move it into an IP-based network. We're going to transition everything over to make it, just to get 911 into the modern era, right, where everybody expects it to be, to catch it up with technology that we all have today in our pockets. So we started that project. We created a design that was going to be 4 regions. We had California broken up into 4 separate regions, not matching the OES, mutual aid regions or anything like that. We had our own separate. We had one in Northern California, one in Central. Los Angeles County was its own region, and then Southern California was its own region. Then we had a single statewide vendor overlaid over the top, like an umbrella network that would be laid over the top. So what the intent was to have each region deliver calls for their own, respective geographic area, and then that prime network, that overlaying network, would sit on top, and it would act in a couple of capacities. It would deliver small elect traffic, so your mom and pop telephone companies, Volcano, Winter Haven, etc. And it would act as a backup for if any single region failed. It would also deliver transfers, cross-region transfers. So, if the Los Angeles region PSAP had to transfer into the southern region, that call would go through the prime network and into the other region. So fairly early on, we did start to notice that we had some issues arising, right? We had some technology issues that were popping up. We had some operational issues that were popping up. I won't get into too much detail there. You can watch the news and probably gain a lot of information there. But effectively, we really started to gather data and details in regards to the issues that we were having so that we could present them to management. Fast forward to late 2024. We had some key retirements here in our office, some leadership changes that allowed us to really dig in with our executive office to show some of the issues that we had and to plead our case for a new path. Shortly thereafter, start of 2025, media reports started to come out and kind of explain some of the issues that we had. We put the project on pause, so we officially went on pause. We stopped migrations. We stopped all other activity for NextGen 911. We had migrated 23 PSAPs. They're all over the state. They're spread around, a few in each region. And we have about 10 other PSAPs that they transfer to. So we have 23 taking direct traffic from one or more carriers. And then we have about 10 that are receiving transfers. So they are currently today still on NextGen 911. There are no other PSAPs that have been migrated at this time. We paused the project. We kept them in stasis. They've been in that state of partial migration for some time now. We've spent the last year working and developing our plan for moving forward, what we're going to do for the path forward, how we're going to address 911 in the future, and what this process is going to look like. It's a very, very, very large project. Just an immense lift that we had already gone through to get to this point. So to do any sort of change in direction was obviously a very big task, and it required a lot of input, a lot of thought. So we've been working with the larger OES, with the carriers, with the NextGen providers to come up with a path forward. So where we are today, we've got effectively, we just signed a contract. So last week, we just got this in place. We have a bridge contract that we're calling it. So Atos, which is the company that provided that statewide network that I was referring to, that overlay network, they had connections into every single PSAP in the state of California. So they were the only vendor that had connectivity everywhere to all 440 of our public safety answering points. So, and they had performed pretty admirably. They've done a pretty good job in terms of the work that we had done leading up to this point. So what we did is we went ahead and we signed a contract with them. We are going to go ahead and move away from the regional approach. Those vendors will transition that traffic over to the prime provider, which has already been done in almost all cases. Atos will then take that traffic at the 23 sites. They'll hold that. They'll basically be responsible for delivering the 911 calls at those sites. And they will start to look at deployment in the Los Angeles region for the Olympics for LA 28. So this is a pretty big addition to the project, right? So holding the PSAP steady is important for us, keeping everyone from any further disruptions or any issues. But the city of Los Angeles has been very adamant and very clear in their stated goal of having the Olympics ready for NextGen 911. We want to be able to deliver NextGen 911 traffic by LA 28. So we started researching that. We started making sure, finding out who would want to be a part of that project, who is going to be involved, which involved, looking through Olympic venue maps, all the stuff that, the larger OES is, I'm sure, planning for as well, especially emergency comms, for that influx of tourists. So we got that established. We got the contract signed. Atos is in now, and they're beginning preparations. So this bridge contract that I'm referring to, it will allow Atos to, again, hold the current PSAP steady, and it'll allow us to migrate the additional. Right now, we're looking at approximately 48 PSAPs in the Los Angeles region that will either have Olympic venue in their jurisdiction, or expecting a mass influx of tourists, et cetera. So we're getting those PSAPs ready to go, but the contract covers us for that migration, and it's in place. It has a definitive term of 30 months with extensions out to 5 years. So what we're doing now is we're working on an RFP. So that brings us up to the future. So right now we're at a state where Atos will take care of us for the 28 or 48 PSAPs for LA 28. They will hold on to them. They will get them migrated. They will get that traffic in place. Moving forward, well, let me stop there. Let me go ahead and pause there. Any questions on the buildup and the current state of 911? I just want to make sure if there's any questions, we can get those addressed. All right. I see one hand up.
Hi, Andrew. Thank you
Cassandra?
so much. Hi, thank you so much, Andrew, for that summary. I was asked by my CEO, the CEO team here in San Bernardino County about this. So the notes you're providing are super helpful, a bit over my head. Is there a way for you to like summarize that so I can just like move it forward to my CAO's office? Like, this is what was discussed at MARAC today so that I make sure that I get the language clear?
Sure. Yeah, no problem. And I probably should have apologized in advance. Even within public safety communications, we speak our own language in 911, and it can be a little bit acronym heavy, and we're a niche inside of a niche. So understand that yes, we are above. Sometimes our language is a little different. What I've got for you though, let me do this. I'll do you one better than a one sheet. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to take over if that's okay with everybody. Right. All right. So if you navigate to our website, we can put it in the chat. It's caloes.ca.gov/911. Take you to our website right here. If you scroll down to our tabs, this very first tab, this Next Generation 911 tab, if you click on that, everything I'm talking about today has been placed here. This is a repository for everything that we're doing. So if I scroll down, I won't scroll too fast, make everyone dizzy. What you've got here are various documents that we can utilize to help get information out to your executives or to your command staff. Right here is the contract I was just referring to. Down here we have some of the information, the accountability and transparency measures, some of the issues we were having with our regional approach that we've put out for the public, so you can see some of the problems we were facing in the architecture difficulties we had, and the steps that we took to address those. And then this right here is kind of the meat of the page that I think will provide value to the folks on the call today. So we have our NextGen 911 transition plan, which is it outlines a lot of what I just talked about. It's not too long. It's about 10 pages. It was written at an executive level, so it's written mostly in plain language. It's a little long, not too long. Then we've got our transition plan, which gives a little bit more detail. Right here, these fact sheets are really, really good, easily digestible, short one-pagers that you can take back to your command staff and your executive staff, and give them the link or give them the PDFs to these. We've got our overview of the transition, which is very, very helpful. Actually, I'll just kind of click on it for you since we're here. It's got basically your executive summary, what to know, support for the locals, and moving forward. So, very plain language. We've got dates in the timeline here. So the Next Generation 911 transition timeline, which I'll get into the future of where we're headed here in 1 second. But this gives you a sort of a lightweight version of what I just, kind of provided you guys. And so this information I think will be very helpful if you want to provide this to your folks upstairs. And then we've got additionals, additional information. There's been a lot of media attention on this, right? And so we're trying to make sure that we get good information out as to, what we're trying to do here at CalOES, why we're trying to make this admittedly very large lift, this big move. This is not an easy project to turn around. This is a $1 billion battleship we're trying to turn here. So, So there has been a lot of, there's a lot of speculation, a lot of doubt. A lot of folks have varied interests in this project, some good, some not so good. So we've definitely been trying to get the information out to let folks know what we're doing and why we're doing it. So hopefully that helps you. And I'll put the link in the chat here in a moment here. But that again, that's caloes.ca.gov/911. And then just migrate to our NextGen tab, and all the links are all pretty well provided here, including our newest link, which is to the actual contract that we just signed with Atos. So if your people need to get a look at that, that's all 250 some odd pages of that contract. So hopefully that helps there. All right, so moving into the future, into our next step, into our next phase, what we want to do is we want to, obviously we'll have Atos get to work in LA. That's the number one goal, is to get LA stay, live and working for the Olympics. They want to get off of this aging infrastructure. But moving forward, right now the team is working on an RFP, right? So we're going to do a request for proposal for a competitive bid, single statewide provider for next generation 911. So we're essentially going back out to bid. Atos, the current statewide provider that is taking care of the Olympics, it's migrating the LA area PSAPs. They will obviously have a chance to bid on that contract, and they may or may not be the winner of that contract. If they are, that obviously simplifies things for us quite a bit, because then that migration is very simple in the future. But that may be another vendor that wins that. There are probably roughly 8, maybe 9 vendors in the country that do this, that provide this. We call it NextGen 911 core services. Not a lot of folks, and so some names you've heard of: AT&T, Motorola, Lumen, formerly CenturyLink. Those are some of the bigger names you may have heard of. And then there's some companies that are kind of specialized within 911 that you may not know, like a Digital or Illyrium. Sorry, they just changed their name. They used to be called Comtech. So there are companies that provide these services that will all be bidding on this contract. The RFP will award a single statewide provider moving forward. We've had some folks express doubts as to the resiliency or the redundancy available in a single vendor provided network. I think most of the folks on here may understand that, just adding more of a vendor doesn't necessarily mean redundancy. Making disparate systems talk to one another sometimes is not so easy. So stacking vendors and networks upon networks, we tried that, and it was very, very difficult for us to do. The coordination and the configuration required was just too difficult to overcome. And so having a single statewide provider, if they've got redundancies built across the country in various availability zones, or various data centers built in different regions, we think we can supply the necessary amount of resiliency and redundancy for California to make NextGen a truly safe and stable platform. So that RFP is expected to be delivered. We're writing it right now. We're hoping to get that out in summer, with an award probably in mid to late fall. And then we'll get started in earnest on the build out next year. Now, like I said, the vendor that wins will have some work to do. If it's Atos, a lot of that work will be done. But if it's not, they'll have to do some work in getting their data centers ready and getting their network built out, which is why we executed the bridge contract, to make sure that Atos has the capability of delivering the Olympics with focus, with no other distraction, with no other there are no other factors at play. They can just focus on that. We'll get the RFP out, and we'll move forward from there. So we hope to have, like I said, that RFP in place mid to late fall. Start migrations probably in late 2027, depending on the effort and the build out, with the goal of getting the state moved on migrations throughout 2028, 2029. The stated goal, the written goal, is to have 911 effectively replaced in the state of California by the end of 2030. So it's a little bit aggressive. I'm not going to lie. We went through this once, and it's a big state, a lot of PSAPs, a lot of geography we've got to overcome. But I think that if we pick a good vendor with a good build out, it's definitely possible. So we're very excited. We're hopeful that it will carry us into the future, and we can just sort of put some of this difficulty behind us. So that's the path for the future. Any questions, comments, concerns on that? I want to make sure that I know there's a lot to it, and I went over a lot of information quickly, but I want to make sure that if you've got other questions, that we can get those addressed. And I'll put the website in the chat right now so that you guys can have that.
Fantastic. Thank you, Andrew. Do we have any questions for Andrew? All right. Seeing none, do we have any closing comments before we conclude this meeting? And seeing none, I want to thank you all for the time, especially the presenters for being flexible. Please give us about a week so we can get the video uploaded and the materials ready for distribution. And again, thank you for your time. You're free to drop.